and you're in pain, soothing as a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner, your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care, each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Sister Kay. Just a few years ago, I attended a meeting of the Socrates Cafe, a group of fun thinkers gathered in the back room of a county library in the foothills of the Blue Ridges of Virginia. The question came up, who is wise? After much banter and unable to come to any conclusions, someone suggested we name a person we considered wise and see if that shed any light on the question. I quickly spoke up. My sister Kay is wise. As all the eyes turned to me, I began to describe this woman, born in 1949, the second child of 5 siblings, 8 years my senior. Kay was always a wise soul. Gentle by nature, Kay is curious, determined, a cheerleader for the underdog. Although I don't believe it is imperative in a description of wise, she is also highly intelligent, most likely from the early grades on, the book smartest of us all. Learning and a lover of books are my first memories of my older sister. Curled up on the couch under the picture window in the kitchen, Kay would immerse herself in a book so deeply that she never heard her name being called for supper. Such was her imagination, though not one to be labeled dreamy. Kay was a focused child, neat and organized in her work, her person, and her studies. My memories of Kay began by the time she was already baking bread for 4-H projects, heading off to summer camps, moistening her clarinet reeds for the junior high band, coming home from the long hike after piano lessons, gently letting me hold the shoes in her extensive glass collection. Add to that a generous nature, a young girl who willingly played the hymns each week for the old men's Bible class at church. It was Kay who opened my world to many firsts: pizza, mushroom in spaghetti sauce, picking violets and making syrup for ice cream, a hand up to climb on the back of our pinto pony, walks in the woods to identify wildflowers. The later firsts were of a different nature: the music of Neil Young, the writings of the poet Richard Brautigan, staying a weekend in her college apartment, a discovery of her stack of Ms. magazines and other feminist writings. Through it all, Kay's strength of character and kindness and sense of social justice never wavered. Her path to become a United Methodist minister was surely no surprise. Although shy in her younger days, Kay seemed to look at adventure as a challenge. She became one of the first of her generation to bop off to Brazil for an exchange summer after learning a few weeks' worth of Portuguese. The next summer, she took a job in rural Webster County, deep in the West Virginia mountains, living in homes still serviced by outhouses and outdoor wells. She headed to Washington, D.C. to voice her concern over civil rights, a questionable war, and inequalities for women. Kay showed no fear nor hesitation in her student teaching days when sent into the halls of an inner city high school where she was met daily with greetings of, "Hey, Miss Almond Joy." She even stayed an extra year beyond the requirement. Kay's influence on me was immense, though always subtle. I chose the same college, far away in northwestern Pennsylvania. I was an exchange student to Australia, not nearly as brave to head to a place where I knew no language, something Kay did many times. She did a stint on a kibbutz in Israel, attended photography school in Denmark, spent a semester of seminary in India, and hitchhiked and Euro-railed across country after country in Europe. Kay had and has it all: determination, independence, an aura of extreme kindness, but a ramrod back for justice. A lover of literature, of art museums and music and ballet. A humble minister holding the hand of a dying parishioner, a trait learned early in life as she went on calls with our country doctor father. Surely these add up to a picture of a wise person, one who laughs, learns, teaches, gives, appreciates, prays, writes, and reaches out to others with an eye toward justice, and walks humbly with her Creator.
My younger sister Beth came into my life when I was 4 years old. One of my first memories of her is her arrival into the family home. For the rest of our childhood, it was the 3 older kids and the 2 younger girls. I went from being the youngest of 4 to being the older of the 2 younger ones. Beth was sweet and secure, which gave her a sense of daring. As children, I followed the rules, and Beth quietly broke them. Because she was so likable, she could and did get away with mischief. One example is when I got grounded at age 17 for being out too late with my boyfriend, something that had not occurred before. Beth, in the meantime, at age 14, was playing with friends, walking into town, or smoking at all hours. But she was like a lovely butterfly that you dare not capture or pin down. Today, Beth has hundreds of friends, both on Facebook and in many groups she is part of in her small town near the Blue Ridge Parkway. There is the Postcard Club, the Wild Women, the spiritual group, her church, her work at the Reynolds Homestead, and her 2 book groups. She has friends from childhood, college, the state she lives in, and Australia, where she spent her senior year of high school. I would not be surprised if many of these people each thought they were her best friend. Beth has a memory like no one else I know. Not only does she remember all these people, but also events, foods, and books. Beth reads all the time and remembers all the authors, book plots, and characters in each of these many books. She listens to NPR, but never watches TV. She has a strong independent streak in her politics. She is constantly even-keeled and generous. Rarely does Beth say anything bad about anyone else. She's very non-judgmental and accepting of others. She greatly dislikes conflict. Beth is a combination of the best characteristics of each of our parents.
My big brother, Greenbrier. He had the most unusual name in our town. My big brother Greenbrier owned it. He was proud of it. His matter-of-fact attitude deterred other kids from taunting him. When a new kid asked how he got that name, he'd happily tell the story about his namesake, an old man our parents met when they were on their honeymoon. Surprisingly, most kids and even his teachers didn't know it wasn't even his legal name until he went down to the courthouse when he turned 18. He paid a whopping $150, $15 for each letter, Greenbrier. For good measure, he made sure Greenbrier came before his birth name, David Ralph. Growing up, we fondly shortened Greenbrier's name to Greenie. Mom sweetly called him Greenbrier when she wanted a favor like getting a log for the kitchen fire. Grandma Flanagan was the only person I ever heard call him David. Greenbrier developed a strong character, not only because he had to defend his unique name, but also because he was the older brother of 4 adorable little sisters. After Kay and Ruth and I came along, he fervently hoped the next baby would be a brother, and he had named him Huckleberry Finn. When Beth was born, he was disappointed, but quickly accepted his role to watch over his little sisters. The 5 of us played well most of the time. We climbed apple trees, played Monopoly in the attic, hit ping pong balls in the basement, and ran through the neighborhood hills. As the oldest, Greenbrier accompanied us to school, to the park, downtown, to the swimming pool, to church, and to Loyal Temperance Legion meetings. Greenie never met a tree or a stream that he didn't like. He loved walking to school, building dams in the rain-filled ditches on our curvy dirt road, playing in the yard with his best neighborhood friend, Danny, swimming in the cold Buchanan River at 4-H camp, or taking long snow hikes with his friend, Mike, and sledding down Brooks's Hill, biking to Spruce Falls in Brushy Fork, or hiking to the top of Mount Hibbs, and making boundary lines at the Wilderness. Greenbrier loved to laugh, and he sang loudly and off-key.
Still does. Thank you, daughter.
You're encouraging me.
Well, he especially sang off-key, especially on vacation trips in the car, where he got the prize shotgun seat in the front with Mom and Dad. Oh, how the back seat passengers rolled their pretty eyes when he belted out his favorite camp song, "Them Bones Gonna Rise Again." Curiosity. Greenbrier possessed that character trait in abundance. He would wonder aloud at the dinner table if dreams connected to reality, or what makes people smart, or why people laugh when they're embarrassed. This curiosity, this wondering about what makes people tick, helped him become a gifted psychiatrist. Greenbrier had a strong sense of self at an early age. In high school, he excelled in English and public speaking, and was active in the debate club, the Buccaneer newspaper, and the marching band, and he became an Eagle Scout. But once he got to college, he focused all of his efforts on his dream of becoming a doctor. He lived at home during his Wesleyan years because he said without the distraction of dorm life, he could achieve better grades and increase his odds to get accepted to medical school. Greenbrier enjoyed a close connection with Mom and Dad. We girls teased him, telling him he was Mama's favorite, and he probably was. Greenbrier and Dad solidified their friendship as medical colleagues. Father and son developed a mutual admiration and respect during Greenbrier's medical school years, and especially when Greenbrier returned to Buchanan to join Dad's medical practice. Although Dad used to joke that psychiatry was the least revered of medical specialties, he was immensely proud of his son, the psychiatrist. Greenbrier adopted Mom and Dad's values, their moral compass. He wanted to do things the right way, and he tried to behave as our parents expected. Seldom did he get into trouble. Sometimes, though, he acted like a typical teenager. Rumor has it that he often skipped out on church when he was in high school. He and his friend sat up in the balcony above the family pew so Mom and Dad could not see him. After the first hymn, the two of them would walk over to the friend's grandmother's house, which was near the church. There, they would have a snack and talk for 45 minutes, scooting back over to their balcony seats just in time for the final hymn. Greenbrier loved growing up in the small town of Buchanan with school and church activities, the Strawberry Festival, West Virginia Wesleyan, our close-knit neighborhood, and our beloved wilderness. Like all of us almonds, Greenbrier is fiercely proud of being a West Virginian, and he continues to proudly own his distinctive West Virginia name.
I don't know how it might be for you if you have 4 or 5 siblings, but they each become my favorite for a while, you know? Don't you know what I mean? Yes. And ditto, yes. Yes. Anyway, so ask, you know, who was my favorite in high school, who was my favorite when I was a young adult, and who's my favorite now. And they just, they change. Yeah.
Sometimes
but I
get out of favor.
yeah, but I love them all very, very much. Wow. And I'm writing about Ruth. My little sister Ruth. Toni Morrison taught me a new word. Actually, a word I should have known, but never met. The word in a novel, A Mercy, is Ruth. You know what Ruth means? Ruth. It means compassion, or mercy, or sympathy. I know the word ruthless. Now I know Ruth. My sister Ruth is full of Ruth. Compassion, mercy, sympathy. She's been that way since the beginning, overflowing with compassion, a feeling with or for whomsoever was in her path. Our widowed Uncle Paul lived in the apartment over the garage. He seemed gruff to us 3 older kids, but he loved Ruthie so much. They were a separate little universe unto themselves. Ruth was just who Paul needed to cut through his loneliness, and Paul was just the babysitter Mom needed and just the adoring friend Ruth needed. When Uncle Paul died, Ruth was 6 years old. She felt that loss deeply, but she was in kindergarten and was beginning her life skill of making and nurturing her friends. In Mrs. Rigger's kindergarten class, she sat at a table with the A's, the B's, and the C's. Brent Beresford, Mike Campbell, Steve Carter, friends she has had all the way through school and through life. Ruth, as an A, was the first graduate of public kindergarten in West Virginia. That's her claim to fame. Making and tending her friends is Ruth's strength. Along came Marilyn Schisler. Ruth and Marilyn have been lasting friends all these years. Ruth is the one of us almond kids who reached out most to the country kids. What a rich source of friends, Martha, Beth Ann, Vicki. As a little friend, Ruthie was a character. As a little girl, Ruthie was a character. She had a way with cameras. She hated photo ops and would stick out her tongue. She pushed her hair behind her ears. They were standouts. When we traveled in the car, we joked about taking a plug for Ruth. She had to pee and pee and pee all the way to Charleston, all the way to Pittsburgh, all the way to New York. In New York City, she found her way back from the pharmacy on the corner, back to our hotel, up the elevator, to our room. She forgot to tell Mom. We were all panicked. Where was our 8-year-old sister? Where could she be? When we finally went back to our room to call the NYPD, there she was, curled up in the hall, taking her nap, not kidnapped at all. Mercy, mercy, mercy. Ruth is fearless. Her compassion pushes her forward, going up to a new person and challenging them to be a friend to this little girl, bringing home another stray cat, joining in our kitchen debates full force. Her opinions mattered. Hitchhiking and catching trains in Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, Italy, and France, trusting her big sis and the universe. Going off to Poland for 17 years as a missionary when it was not so safe and not so convenient. Ruth could not spell, and at times she thought she was not smart, but she is very smart. She's a serious soul, sometimes weighed down by the world. She loves to read. She writes letters and notes better than any of us. She writes stories and essays that are rich from her memory and her caring soul. She earned top grades in her master's from seminary. Ruth is a lover and a learner and a listener. She's a good wife to Rich, an amazing mother to Joseph and Christopher. She loves God. Her faith is alive and growing. I remember when Ruth was entering 7th grade, she trusted me with her hair and a pair of scissors. A dreadful mistake. Ruth entered her new world with a sad and sorry hairdo. She forgave me. The hair grew, and her trust of me gradually renewed. But she will not let me close to her hair with scissors. Wise woman. Ruth loves cats, especially white cats. She loves cooking, baking bread, driving a car, discovering children's literature, exploring art museums, living the seasons of West Virginia, and she will speak her mind. Just ask her. Ruth means mercy or compassion, the opposite of ruthless. My sister Ruth is full of Ruth.
We have 8 sections of stories like this. We're reading the sibling section completely, and earlier we've read selections of the other sections. So there's more to come, but this will be the last. To the best. This will be the best. Annie. Upshur County Youth Camp in Selbyville has a Brigadoon air about it, coming out of the mountain mist, not every 100 years, but every year. Kay, Annie, Ruthie, Bethy, and I attend camp there every summer. One magic moment occurred when I was 14 years old and Annie was 12 years old. Lights out, time to sleep. Guys talking back and forth in cabin number 3, as teenagers do. From the upper bunk 2 rows over, I got a request that gave me pause. Tell me about your sister Annie. Well, I said without further hesitation, she keeps a neat house. My remark was not supposed to be a joke, but the whole cabin roared with laughter. That was an unexpected response, to say the least. Behind the question, as I thought about it, was the obvious observation that Annie had girl next door good looks. Besides being neat, Annie has creativity. I continued, she changes her hairstyle every day. It's quite a feat to wear a ponytail with bangs one day, a French twist the next day, followed by a pigtail braids the day after. By junior high, Annie had perfected her role as a middle child. She's mentioned that 3 times today. Now, I know more about the effects of child order, but from my upper bunk in cabin number 3 on a June evening in Brigadoon, I could say, Annie has charm. She can get along readily and well, but she is not a pushover. Annie reads Mom and Dad the best of all of us kids. She can figure out what to say to get our parents to say yes. I recounted the time Annie convinced Mom and Dad to take a detour on our family vacation to pass by Ripley's, believe it or not, museum in St. Augustine, Florida. Mom wanted to see the Bach Singing Tower in Lake Wales. Dad wanted to get to Miami for his medical meeting. But Annie knew if we left Atlanta and Dad drove our Jeep hard, we could stop to see what we read about every Sunday in the funny papers. Right there with Tarzan and Dick Tracy was Ripley's Believe It or Not. Well, we got there, and I loved it. Later, we saw the Singing Tower, and Dad had an exceptional medical meeting. I thank Ann for her charm and her diplomacy. Lying on the bunk, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about what else to tell a room full of teenage boys about my middle sister, I said, Annie has class. Hey guys, my clothes are simple to say the least. Annie helps me choose to be better. She even taught me how to tie a necktie. She wanted me to have wavy hair, so she curled my blonde hair. A bully in junior high started calling me Goldilocks to taunt me, but I did look great with curly hair. I became classy thanks to Annie. Annie has had our favorite Briar, and she read that story to you too, didn't she? We always have a dog, and his name is always Briar. My sheep herding collie stayed behind in Nebraska when we moved to West Virginia. Kay's collie did not prove too friendly, but not Kay's fault. But Annie's Briar is a prince. He even lets us roughhouse with him. He follows us up and down the neighborhood, protecting us from other dogs and even bulls if we get in the pasture. Annie takes a great care of her Briar. She combs his hair and feeds him table scraps from her plate. Briar knows Annie cares. I declared on that warm night at the Selbyville Youth Camp. And then I went back to my first thought. Doggone it, Annie keeps a neat house. If I ever need to find something, Annie knows just where it is. She has Mom's knack of having a place for everything and everything in its place. I felt fortunate having a little sister like Annie who proved neat, creative, charming, persuasive, classy, and caring.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care. Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.